Hello again and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to start in with the data warehouse tutorial as part of Fabric, and you can go to this URL, right, learn.microsoft.com, MSFabric Data Warehouse Tutorial, and get started. You can see here that this tutorial is kind of long. It's 14 steps, including the cleanup. So we'll see how far we can get in a reasonable amount of time. I don't want to belabor any points, but at the same time, there's a few things that I'd like to get into that are important. You can read through this yourself. I'm not going to read it to you, but anyway, here's a list of the 14 steps as you go through everything. So we're going to be talking about creating some tables. We're talking about loading some data with Transact SQL. We're going to talk about cloning. We're going to talk about putting in a stored procedure. We're going to do some time travel stuff, and I'm going to get into in this cloning section here. I'll show you some easy tricks to get some data about the Delta tables inside of your warehouse, because keep in mind that everything here is Delta. So, and what is Delta, right? Delta is a transaction log built on top of Parquet files presented as a table, right? When you really boil it down, that's what it is. So anyway, let's get into it. Create a workspace, right? Obviously, I'm just going to use the same old workspace that I have. It's called My Workspace on my free trial. I'm going to go in and create a warehouse real quick. So let's go back to My Workspace, and here's here's my warehouse, right? Wide World Importers. So that is my warehouse. Obviously, each one comes with a semantic model that you can use for basing reports off of. Nothing gets added to it. Well, everything and nothing gets added to it automatically. So let's just look at it real quick and start to go through this um, with parts of the tutorial. So, uh, right, create a warehouse. Obviously, in your workspace here, you'd create a new item, and in your new item, you could just say warehouse, right? Select that warehouse, give it a name, and as soon as you give it a name, it will build your warehouse for you. Now, a warehouse is not a lake house, right? If you notice, see the little water thing there uh, in the lower right-hand corner, that's a lake house. This warehouse doesn't have that, right? Now, obviously, this says warehouse and that says lake house, so pretty straight up, pretty straightforward. So we'll go on to the next thing. We're going to ingest some data, and that's what I was just re-looking at to make sure that I was ready to hand it off to folks. So um, essentially, inside of our workspace here, they want you to create a new item. So I'm in my workspace. They want you to create a new item, and they want you to create a copy. So let's just look back at it. So in the workspace landing page, select new item to display a full list of the available things, right? From the list in get data, select data pipeline item, the new pipeline, right? Enter load customer data. So that's what we have. That's what we have right here is this data pipeline, load customer data. So if you follow along with the tutorial, right, it'll give you pipeline activity, and that's what you want to do. You want to create a copy data, and let's go through that real quick. So uh, once you actually create that pipeline, I have WH underscore here for pretty much everything that I did for this warehouse. Not everything, but most things. And this is my copy data task. So in general here, I gave it a name, right? Nothing rocket science there. And we give it a source. Now the source actually comes from down here in the URL, right? Comes from sample data. And then from sample data, you want to get the tables and you want to get dimension customers Parquet. So let's look at that real quick. So if you browse, the name here is a little bit different than what it is in the tutorial. So if you browse the entirety of the uh, world, worldwide importers data warehouse, right? So you go to sample data or wide world importers, and it's going to take a second to load. There we go. So this is all the sample data that's available as part of that folder structure in Azure Blob Storage. So I'm going to select Wide World Importers Data Warehouse. And if we look at tables, you'll see we do have a dimension customer parquet, and we could change this to be that. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to, because that actually matches what we have down here, dimension customer parquet in tables. All right, so there we go there. Let's give it that destination. I'm going to say auto create my table instead of use existing as part of that. And it's going to go into my uh, wide world importers when I create it. So I'm going to save that because I'm going to save a change. So it's gathering my changes to save. And I like the little alerts up here that it gives you because it tells you, hey, that's saved, or your compute session is disconnected. It gives you a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to run that real quick, and we will watch as this runs. So as things run, it gives you that pipeline good, right? And tells you that obviously its status is queued. I don't remember this taking very long, a minute or two, maybe. But it's interesting as we go through while this is running. I'm going to flip back over to the tutorial here itself, and they do save and run, right? And then they want you to create some tables. So they actually give you the table script. So you're going to open your warehouse. You're going to do a new SQL query. You'll copy this script in, which creates dimensions city and fact sale. And then you'll run that, close it, save it as create tables. And then you're going to have, right, dimension city, dimension customer that we're creating right now, and fact sale. And you'll see that there isn't a little delta here like there is in the lake house. But I'll show you that these are actually delta tables. And then I'll show you some other fun stuff about how to get some information. So this succeeded, right? So we loaded dimension customer, so that's all good. I'm gonna go back into my warehouse here. I'm going to look at my queries, and I got a bunch of queries down here. So don't take this uh, to difficulty. Create tables. So here's create tables, right, as it existed. So just copied it and pasted it into a new query window and saved it per the create tables, right? That's pretty much it, and it creates for you those two tables. So you get fact sale out of that, and you get dimension city out of that. So the next one is to load some data with T-SQL. And this uses, so back in the normal SQL days, we had it locked down, at least most administrators had it locked down, the functionality of open row set, because it does create a bit of a security hole depending on how it's used and where it's used. You definitely don't want to use that in production from a normal SQL database standpoint. But in this particular instance, they're using open row set to take a look at the dimension city and fact sale parquet files, and they're giving you the top 10 of those, right? So just select the top 10 all from those, and let's go over here now that we have that. And remember, yep, here we go. So let's just take a quick look at it. and you see that it aliased um, it aliases, or the script itself aliases this open row set as sample. So if you wanted to, so let's say you only wanted a couple of columns, you should be able to do sample dot and get some IntelliSense, but sample dot all should technically work. At any rate, looking back at this, we're looking at the results pane, results one and results two. So you notice we've got two queries here. So you want to see results one and results two, that's over here. And that's also something that they don't tell you about from this particular part of the tutorial, how to see the different results. So they go on from there to actually load tables using a from statement across a instead of the open row set functionality, they're just using a from clause here to look at the Parquet files that are sitting out there with file type Parquet. So we're going to load those actual files. So go back in here. We're going to do load tables. So here's that same query, just kind of paste it in. And when you, well, real quick, I'm going to do one. Why did it float off of there? So I'll just trunk those real quick. And then we'll load them. So just a quick trunk and load, right? Pretty standard data warehousing type stuff. And this usually takes a minute because it's actually pulling quite a bit of data out of that blob storage folder. And you wouldn't want a data warehouse that has 50 rows in it, right? So you want enough data to be able to chew on and make it work. So going back over here, that's what we're doing right now is we're running that, and we've renamed the query already to load tables as per the tutorial. So let's get on with cloning, right? So you might create clones of tables um, to be particular points in time of a table that you want to use in, say, a semantic model, because you only want your semantic model to refresh for your report source every so often. I mean, let's say you have a lower tier of Power BI that doesn't support tons of refreshes, or you have the very baseline tier with only supports a refresh of once a day. Well, you may want to have your clone tables only be created once a day based on, you know, based on that requirement. There's other reasons to do it, but that's just one. You throw it out there. That's just one of them. Anyhow, is this done yet? Nope, it's still running. Get rid of that trunk query because we don't need it. And as soon as that other one is done, then we'll talk about this, right? Clone a table, and this really is create table, right, as clone of whatever table you want to clone. That's kind of the basic gist of it, right? Is creating that clone. No rocket science, just makes a copy of the table, and you're all good, right? You're ready to rock and roll. That's still running. There we go, all done. So let's take a quick look at Dimension City. Just click on it, and it's going to get you the first 1,000 rows as part of the preview, right? It's showing 1,000 rows. And this is just Dimension City, right, with the city key. And the city ID, of course, we're talking about data warehousing. So this is a surrogate key that gets flooded into your fact sale. So we'll take a quick look at fact sale. And you can, here's our city key, right? Our sale key, customer key, pretty standard data warehousing stuff. They did a nice job of putting together this little star schema so that it was easy to understand, right? I mean, let's face it, what's a demo if it's not easy to understand? Okay, so I'm going to go in here and actually get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. I'm going to, why does it do that? That's city one. And really what you should do if you aren't totally sure, and this is kind of new sort of I don't know. In the old days, we used to have to write a conditional statement, and we would look in the sysobjects catalog. We'd say, if not exists, select all from sysobjects, where object ID equals object ID, and then you pass in the table name, and then it would drop the table, blah blah blah. But now this if exists is kind of nice, right? I mean, we can just clean up stuff, and that's what I'm gonna do. And really, the reason I do it this way and always use the if exists is it actually predates IntelliSense, and it says, hey, if I screw up that name and then I look back at my refresh data source and that wasn't dropped, well, then I've got a real problem. So your other option, so let's say I didn't want to type that out. I could actually grab this. Come on, gotta hold it for a second. And I could drop it right there. So drag it out, drop it, make it work, that kind of fun stuff. So let's just whack those. And I'll refresh that and we're good. Okay, so let's talk about these clonings. I've got a new query out there. I'm gonna clone that dimension city. I'm gonna clone it as fact sale one and dimension city one that we just got rid of. And just want to paste that in. I don't remember if I saved those clones, clone tables, right? Which is the same that we have there. But it's easy enough to just cut it and paste it in. They give you the stuff, they give you the goods. So then that's cloned in, and there's my Dimension City one and Fact Sale one. Right. So no rocket science there, pretty easy. Let's get back to that. And like I said, it shows you those in the Data Explorer. Now here's where things get a little bit fun. Now, if we want to create Dimension City 2 and Fact Sale 2 as clone of Fact Sale at a particular point in time, there's some things that you need to know. And what you need to know is it says here important, you should replace the timestamp with the past date that is written within 30 days of today. And I'll explain that in a second. But after the date and time in UTC that you completed the ingest to data warehouse. Well, we just did the ingest to data warehouse, didn't we? Okay. So let's look at this. I'm going to copy that, put it over here, create a new query, and I'm going to say, hey, paste that in. Now, I know that I'm looking at fact sale and dimension city as the tables that I want to be able to replace this date and time with. Well, how do I get to that information that is part of Delta when I don't see the little Delta here? I'll show you a trick. Um, so what I did is I created a notebook over here. Well, actually, the first thing I did is I created a lake house. And this is kind of roundabout, but it's what had to get done. is I created this lake house that is shortcuts to the tables that are in my warehouse, right? So here's my lake house, and here's my tables, and you see the little link up there tells you that that's a shortcut. And I have dimension city and fact sale. And here's the data, right? The first 1,000 rows for each one. Well, now what do I do? Okay, so right, create a lake house, create the links or the shortcuts, and then create. I mean, we could open a notebook here. We could say open an existing notebook, right? And that's where I created this notebook. You could also um, you could also just build a new notebook if you wanted to. So what I wanted to show you here was when you create a new notebook, it's going to default to PySpark over here, which is totally fine. It's fine. You could use Scala, you could use Spark SQL, and I'll show you how to convert it in just a second. You could use Transact SQL if you want to. But when you drag out, stick with that. When you just drag out a cell, matter of fact, let's do this. Let's wipe that one out. I just wiped out two cells. So let's do this real quick. And here's my dimension city, and here's my fact sale. So let's say I want to add a code cell, and I'm going to just drag out fact sale. So it defaults to PySpark, and it gives me a select with the top 1,000, right, as it normally does, and it says display my data frame because it's creating a data frame. Well, let's say I want to just be able to explore some of this without um, without too much ado, and let's just look at how great the functionality is. I really kind of like it. I mean, honestly, it's really nice. So it's going to take an analysis of the first 1,000 rows, and it's going to give you some data back. And keep in mind, I haven't done anything to the root data. I haven't had to recopy the data. I haven't had to do anything to it to move it anywhere. I just created a shortcut to it in my lakehouse, and then I've created this um, notebook to give me some information based on the things that I want to know. Because over here, you see the fact that that's a delta table, which is pretty nice, right? Now you're 100% sure that hey, that's a delta table, and that delta table create is a transaction log that lives over the Parquet files that it represents, right? So let's take a look. Sale key, obviously we have all of them unique, none of them are missing, but we have month down here that's actually missing in that it's completely missing across the entirety of uh, of that of that data set. So then we see we have year missing. We have delivery date key, which is not missing. So as a data engineer, I would take a look at quarter and year and month, right? I would take a look at that and say, okay, well, those are missing. Do we want to just use this delivery date key, which goes back to the delivery dates, and get rid of those in the upcoming data set? Or do we want to interpolate um, these values based on the delivery date key, right? Chopping out or backfilling year based on that delivery date key, or some other, right, invoice date key, that sort of stuff. So let's say you wanted to look at the entirety of that data set, not just that sample. So you'd hover down here, you do a a new row, and we have that data frame already. And let's see if this works because this is a pandas thing, and it might not. If we have to recast this as a pandas data frame, we can do that. So it didn't like that. So we're going to say import pandas as PD. And now that we've got pandas, we're going to say PD df um, data frame df, and then we should be able to say df second. There's is null, and there's sum. And this is gonna, didn't like pandas. All right, well, I'll figure that one out. Data frame constructor is not properly called. Data any non-access columns, data type. Parquet, no. Oh, that's one thing I've noticed about these workbooks is sometimes they take you to places. They take you to places that you didn't necessarily want to go. Let's see if that one actually works better. Nope, didn't like that either. Oh well, we'll get back to that in a minute. So let's say you want to know uh, what the time was that you need to be able to put back into that last query. So what you can do is say describe history. Actually, first thing I need to do is switch this over to SQL. So there we go. Describe history fact sale. Doesn't like that, not capitalized. That's okay. So we want to describe the history from fact sale to see what that value was supposed to be. All right. So here's our history of fact sale when we look at it. So the first version, this is the timestamp from the first version. These are the timestamps from the subsequent versions or any updates that got worked out. So today, the first version was already there, right? If you remember, and the second version here was the version that I deleted or I truncated, and the third version is the version that got populated just a few minutes ago when we were working with it. And then after that is that next version. So if you want to, you can just copy that, right? Control C, go back into your warehouse and say, hey, I wanted to create these as a clone of that first point. And you know that those should work. So we're going to create dimension city 2 and fact sale 2 based on that timestamp that we just got out of there. And now that runs successfully and we get those secondary values. So this is starting to run long. We're into it for a half an hour and we really haven't gotten past this clone a table. So the last part of this is clone a table across schemas within the same warehouse. All right. So again, you're just creating a new schema and then using those same clone commands that we used before. No rocket science there. and then we're going to transform data with a stored procedure. I'm going to try and blaze through this pretty quick. This one is actually super easy. They give you the stored procedure, and I'm never a fan of stored procedures that drop and create tables. Trunk and load is a pretty standard uh, data warehousing technique. Totally, everybody understands trunk and load, but creating tables and then populating them is probably, in my opinion, not something that should be done as stored procedure, despite the fact that it's here. So let's just create a quick look at this. We're going to say creates a stored procedure called populate aggregate sale by city, and then stored procedure logic creates the aggregate sale by date and city table. So what I'm going to do here is I created the stored procedure already, which is based on, uh, I can say here, I want to look at this. So here's my stored proc, right, which is just a direct copy of what was the uh, in the tutorial itself. And so I'm going to create a new query here, and I'm just going to say, come on, doesn't want to, IntelliSense works just fine. So this will take a second because it's doing those aggregations. Go back and look at the query real quick. So it's doing an insert into this table that it just created, and it's summing the total excluded tax, summing the tax amount, summing the total including tax, and summing the profit, some profit from fact sale, and doing an inner join against the dimension city because we want that, and of course it wants that invoice date key, right, from the invoice dates, and it wants the city, state, and province from the dimension city, and of course then a group by and an order by. Without breaking down the actual SQL, keep in mind that everything in your group by clause here has to be part of your non-aggregated columns, but then you can order by whatever you want. So again, this is, select it, run it, which is exactly what we just did, and then we're going to start looking at the data. So let's have a quick look at that data. And then I'm going to cut this one short. We're 32 minutes in and almost 33 now. And it's probably time to cut this short. We'll get back into this in the next video where we pick up the time travel stuff, which is step 8 of 14. So we're a little bit more than halfway done. Okay, thanks guys. Have a good one. We'll catch you back in a few minutes.